White as chalk, Natasha sat by her husband's bedside, holding his hand. Her beloved Vasily lay there, and only shook her fingers lightly, so that her wife knew that he was with her and that he was listening to her. And Natasha, swallowing her tears, whispered softly that they will definitely go in the summer to the cottage. It would be beautiful there, with a blooming garden and a quiet river. But the tears rolled treacherously from her eyes, and Natasha hurriedly wiped them away with her free hand. Her husband should not show that she was crying. Just 3 months ago, on a February evening, the man had felt slightly ill. The morning started with a cough. Quickly a rabid cancer ate her lover and didn't choke. Turned the 2-meter giant into a skin-tight skeleton. So now he lies there unable to open his eyes, and his beloved's fingers are extremely difficult to shake. He knows very well that it is not long now. But his mind drills terrible thoughts. What about her? How will she be without me? For we've been inseparable since high school. He carried her in his arms. And now she's alone without a shoulder to lean on. We'll have to think of something. Only what he can. Vasily opened his eyelids with difficulty and looked at his wife. Listen to me, little one. Don't interrupt. Exactly 1 week after I'm gone, there'll be a white dog at the door. Don't chase him away. He'll bring happiness. The man stopped, tiredly turned away, and Natalia sobbed, jumped out of the room. She stood with her forehead against the wall, unable to stop crying. She rushed after the doctor. And when they entered the room together, it was over. The man's heart was not beating. Natasha wandered around the empty apartment, going through her beloved's things. The relatives had taken care of the funeral. The woman looked so lost, and now she was all alone. She was well into her 40s, it was too late to even dream of having a child. Upon learning of her husband's death, Natasha was let go on an unplanned vacation. Although it would have been better to go to work, she remarked. Suddenly the bell rang in the hallway. Natalia was not expecting anyone, but nevertheless went to open it. Perhaps someone else had decided to offer her condolences. After all, her husband had many friends. Without looking through the peephole, the woman opened the door wide and froze in place. Crossing the threshold with a rug, the little mongrel stared warily at her. There was not a soul around. The woman was surprised. There was no way the dog could ring the doorbell. But then who had pressed the bell? She was about to slam the door, but suddenly she stopped. In her voice she heard her husband's last words, which she perceived as delirium. After all, the dog sitting on the mat was completely white. And yes, today was indeed the 7th day. Natasha opened the door wide, and the dog entered without hesitation. But most importantly, the dog confidently walked into the kitchen and climbed under the stool, which Vasily always considered his own. And so he lay there, looking at Natasha with intelligent eyes. And when she offered him something to eat, he pounced with undisguised pleasure. The woman thoughtfully stirred her spoon with her tea, looking at the dog nibbling on his food. Clean coat, pretty face, the dog was clearly not a street dog. But why such hunger? Do you want to stay? She asked the dog. The dog wagged its tail in thanks. They somehow quickly became friends, and the dog often spent the night at her feet. That night her heart strangely ached. She woke up in the middle of the night and realized that she couldn't breathe at all. It was an asthma attack. Medication, which she always put under the pillow before going to bed, this time she forgot to put. Natasha was about to lose consciousness when a wet dog's nose pressed into her hand. Somehow incomprehensible way he realized what she needed and found the medicine left on the table. At the time, the woman was very frightened to realize what the dog had done. But very soon she realized that he was her mascot and called him Ben. He was always there to help in the most difficult of moments, like the day when Natasha forgot to lock the door and an alcoholic neighbor broke into the apartment. Realizing that the woman was defenseless, the aggressive man threatened her, demanding money for a hangover. Natasha was completely confused, and then Ben with a loud bark rushed to the defense of his mistress. And even after getting kicked, he did not unclench his jaw on the intercepted leg, forcing the rascal to cowardly run away. Natasha loved Ben with all her heart, and very often they could be seen in the old park for a walk. The woman gradually calmed down after the death of her husband, especially since his last gift was unstoppable near. And on that warm day in early autumn, the dog insistently dragged Natasha out of the house. Tired after work, the woman did not feel like going for a walk. She would have liked to rest for a couple of hours, but Ben kept shoving his leash into her hands and the woman gave in. Only the walk did not work from the very beginning. The dog went crazy, running like mad, as if afraid of not getting anywhere, and dragged the owner to the far end of the park. He calmed down and rushed off to investigate the nearest bushes. That's when Natasha saw him on the wet bench after the rain. A boy about 10 years old was sitting crying his eyes out, but when he saw him, she wiped them clean and turned away. The woman cautiously sat down next to him. Perhaps the boy needed help. She didn't know how to start a conversation with him. But here, too, the faithful Ben came to the rescue. Abandoning his canine business, he trustingly ducked into the boy's lap, and the boy smiled slightly, looking at the shaggy head of the dog. Sure enough, they got to talking. The kid told her that he ran away from the orphanage and had nowhere to go. Natasha even forgot about her pain. She stroked the boy on the head, and somehow imperceptibly told him about her dead husband and Ben. Then she went to see him off at the orphanage. Early in the morning, the woman was already knocking on the door of the administration of the orphanage. She was begging, proving that she could take the boy, demanding the director. She got a good salary, high. She lives alone in a huge 3-room apartment, and has a summer house. But she was dissuaded. This boy is complicated. There's the little ones, how many to choose from? They're problem-free, just waiting for affectionate hands. This one's withdrawn into himself. But the woman refused. She didn't want anyone else, only Igor. She asked to check on him. When Igor saw Natasha on the doorstep of the playroom, he lit up from inside. "Auntie, did you really come to see me?" Natasha talked to the boy for a long time, fed him with buns, and persuaded Igor to go to live with her. Of course, no one can replace his mother, but children should not live in orphanages. Everyone should have a family, a place where they love and wait for you. "I'll always be waiting for you, Igor," Natasha whispered, holding the boy's head against her. And he was choking on tears, choking on the forgotten scent of his mother. Documents necessary woman arranged surprisingly easily. And in a month Igor crossed the threshold of her apartment. Ben rushed to meet the child like a madman, and the latter, picking up the dog in his arms, buried his face in his white fluffy fur. Natasha fussed, putting out all the delicious things on the table. And then sat for a long time at Igor's bedside, who was sleeping a restless sleep. A month of probation flew by like the blink of an eye. Natasha was given the necessary documents, and Igor was no longer recognizable. He no longer screamed in his sleep, but followed his Aunt Natasha, afraid to let go of her hand. People she knew twiddled their thumbs. Why did she need a stranger's boy? She would live and live for herself. She only smiled. That day, on her way home from work, she saw Igor riding his bicycle across the yard from afar. Only something went wrong. Suddenly the bike flipped over, and fell right on top of the child. Igor cried out loudly, and Natasha's heart dropped into her stomach. Dropping the grocery bags, she rushed to the fallen child, cradled his head, began to blow on his bruised knees. "Now, little one, it won't hurt now," she whispered fearfully. "Be patient, mother is beside." And the boy looked up at her with tearful eyes. "Don't cry, mama, it doesn't hurt anymore." Natasha knelt beside her son and smiled through happy tears. A warm wave filled her soul like an empty jug. And from the second-floor window you could see the muzzle of Ben, ready to rush to the aid of his loved ones in an instant.